What should have been a fun, team-building exercise in the Scottish Highlands instead turned into what is described as Britain's worst mountaineering tragedy. This is the story of the Cairngorm Plateau Disaster. The Cairngorms is a vast mountainous region in the Scottish Highlands, named after the mountain Cairngorm, which looks over the town of Aviemore. On Saturday the 20th of November 1971, 14 schoolchildren, along with their team leaders Ben Beattie and his girlfriend Catherine Davidson, set off on a 2-day navigational exercise. The group separated into two smaller groups, one led by Ben and one led by Catherine, who was also with trainee instructor Sheila Sunderland. After both groups crossed the plateau, they were to descend to a lower level where they would spend the night. Sunset was just before 4 o'clock. The less experienced group, led by Catherine, were to go an easier way down. In case of an emergency, each group was to go to the Curran shelter. Very shortly after the group set off, the weather began to deteriorate and snow began falling heavily. Ben and their group managed to make their way down to the Curran shelter, where they dug snow from the door to spend the night. However, Catherine's group weren't so lucky. Catherine was worried that they would not be able to find the shelter in the whiteout conditions caused by the snow, and made an on-the-cusp decision that would later prove to be fatal. She decided to make a temporary, forced camp without tents on a spot unknown to Davidson that was known for collecting huge amounts of snow. Her group sheltered in sleeping bags in a snow wall that the group built and started off in good spirits. However, with the night came heavy snow, and by the time morning came, Sunderland was barely even conscious. Davidson set off to get help, but was almost instantly forced back. Meanwhile, Beattie's group had great difficulty getting out of the shelter due to the deep snow, but eventually they made it down the plateau and reached their camp. This is when they noticed Davidson's group was not there and reported them missing. Throughout the day, the blizzard worsened and their screams and shouts were not heard by the rescue team, who at this point were looking for them. During the second night, the children were becoming delirious and were sadly dying. In the morning, Davidson set off again on her own to get help, and eventually was found by the rescue team. By the time they found her, she was crawling. Her legs were locked in an kneeling position. She was in an advanced stage of hypothermia, and her hands were frozen solid. After being taken to Aviemore by helicopter, in a confused and delirious state, she let the rescuers know that the rest of the party was close to where she had been rescued. When the rescuers found them, they were shocked at what they had discovered. The bodies of 6 children and the assistant were dug out, one from a depth of 1.2 metres of snow. All were dead except the last person to be uncovered, Raymond Leslie, who miraculously survived. After, an inquiry was held which uncovered many troubling details, including that the consent form issued to the parents didn't say that the winter mountaineering was involved. The deaths were determined to have been from cold and exposure, but in the end no one was criminally blamed. One of the rescuers, John Duff, said Catherine's decision was a serious mistake. To attempt a winter camp in a storm on a Cairngorm plateau is literally a life or death decision and a last option. He also wrote that the major mistake was to even have considered an appallingly over-ambitious expedition for teenage children, and he laid the blame on the people making and accepting the plans. A memorial service to the victims was held at Inch Parish Church on the 28th of November 1971.